In Non-Professor Dave's discussion with MythVision about his debate with Dave Weiss, I noticed literally every objection they raised about flat Earth was an obvious logical fallacy, without a single exception in the entire hour-long video. I thought it would be amusing to add a logical fallacy counter.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have Dave Farina, Professor Dave Explains, with us here at MythVision. How are you, my friend?
Let's fast forward through MythVision's pathetic, sycophantic fawning over Non-Professor Dave and get right to it.
But I want to make the point that it seems like there's actually more of an underlying issue to this than just the Earth is flat, or observations supposedly of the Earth being flat.
There's nothing scientific about it. It's rooted in conspiracy, obviously.
This is a fallacy of scientism, which is a type of category error. Corruption is one of the recognized limitations of the scientific method. So it's fallacious to hand-wave dismiss claims of corruption in science. A conspiracy theory is just any theory which includes official corruption. And obviously, such theories can either be true or false. Like any other theory, theories which include official corruption need to be evaluated objectively on their own merit based upon the evidence. For example, just consider decades ago, when corrupt scientific research made cigarettes seem safer than they were, all of which passed peer review. When others began exposing the conspiracy by the tobacco companies, who collectively funded all of the research, fools like Dave almost prevented them from exposing the truth by calling it a crazy conspiracy theory, science denialism, etc.
It's the bottom of the barrel for all conspiracy theories.
That's an appeal to ridicule fallacy, of course.
Flat earthers people who believe in flat Earth believe in every other conspiracy, every single one.
This is a stereotyping fallacy, since he's making a sweeping generalization about an entire demographic in a fallacious manner. But worse, it's false. I've never met a single flat earther who believed every single conspiracy. They tend to be better at differentiating which ones are true from which ones are distractions, though.
Yeah,
Because
there's a
it's the
lot
most
of
overarching one, you know?
yeah. There's that's something that I find common is that uh, don't trust anything coming from the government. Like all of the people that I've associated with in the past on Facebook that I've bumped into, there's some conspiracy with the vaccines. There's something going on with the government. QAnon. A lot of them were
Right.
QAnon fans.
Oh, they're all QAnon. They're all anti-vaxxers. Yeah.
Stereotyping fallacy again. And again, it's false. In my experience, few flat earthers are into Q. Aliens, lizard people, etc. The flat earthers in my circle dismiss such theories as distractions or psyops. The elements of truth within such theories grab the attention of a few. But overall, most flat earthers recognize the deliberately absurd claims mixed in are only there to provoke scientism fundamentalists like Dave to commit stereotyping fallacies like this.
It's
But
just yeah.
the difference is that if you're an anti-vaxxer, the government is disseminating the vaccines. Right now, they didn't develop the vaccines. The private sector developed the
Mhm.
vaccines, but the government is disseminating the vaccines. So, as dumb as it is, and and most anti-vax talking points that they would say, "I don't trust the government because the vaccines are coming from the government." There's like this tiny little thread of logic in there. Whereas with flat Earth, we've known that Earth is a sphere for several thousand years.
He's assuming precisely what he needs to prove, which is begging the question.
Right.
Before any government that is around today existed. So none of this is coming from the government. This is all based on naked eye observations and logic that anyone should be able to perform and understand. And in fact, most of my debunks are focused on that. It has nothing to do with you got told in school. No, anybody can do this. You look at things, you look at stars, you observe things, you look at the sun, and you conclude using basic logic that the Earth is a sphere, which is why the ancient Greeks figured it out. So that's why the conspiracy unravels really, really quickly. So
Dave is laughably trying to spin it off here, as if people believing heliocentrism has absolutely nothing to do with being heavily indoctrinated through the education system, as if it has nothing to do with governmental space agencies, or how they've been feeding the public a steady diet of poorly edited images and videos, supposedly of outer space. Right? It totally has nothing to do with any of that, Dave. Sure, We totally believe you. Anyhow, his fallacy is cherry-picking his history. Even according to the mainstream narrative itself, there were some ancient Greeks who believed in the globe and other Greeks who believed in a flat Earth. There definitely was not a consensus for the heliocentric model thousands of years ago, as he's trying to argue with this cherry-picking fallacy. It wasn't even a common view back then, as he's trying to make it seem.
I agree with you 100%. I just can't emphasize that enough as we dive into this, that conspiracies of distrust and you name it, it's like, I don't know how you have the patience to do this sometimes, to be honest with you. So,
Ad hominem fallacy. I could just as easily argue I don't have the patience for their distrust of flat earthers. That's the problem with logical fallacies. They can usually be reversed right back onto you by simply swapping out a few words. They never provide any relevant information as to the truth or falsity of either position in contention, but often persuade the weak-minded regardless.
Yeah, it wears thin sometimes. I'm kind of tired of talking about flat Earth, but I know
but I begged you, didn't I? I was like,
one.
please come on and at least do one. So let's go through 10 quick examples. We're going to spend a short amount of time here. These should be easy examples that you could tell for yourself that the Earth is not flat. And the number one that comes to mind is the moon. Can you tell us why the moon proves the Earth is not flat?
Right. So I did a debunk on this, and the points I put forward there are that we always see the same face of the moon, right? And it does rotate depending on your latitude, which also proves the Earth is a sphere. But we all see the same face of the moon.
Here's a list of quotes from prominent scientists explaining why it's not possible to scientifically verify the heliocentric model by appealing to observations of lights in the sky. Notice how they talk about how all such observations can be interpreted to fit a variety of models. So Dave is begging the question. He's assuming the metaphysical theory of materialism applies universally. So he's assuming the lights in the sky are all material objects. He's then attempting to make scientific predictions based upon how he imagines they should appear if his philosophical assumptions are true. That's assuming precisely what is in contention, since flat Earth has different metaphysical presuppositions regarding the lights in the sky. Plus, even if their insistence on begging the question with materialism for the lights in the sky is granted, there's still a lot of debate within the mainstream scientific community regarding what the moon actually is, most of which is brushed under the rug these days. Here's a scientist from 1965, shortly before the supposed moon landings.
What is your theory?
Well, it is by now rather more than a theory. 10 or 11 years ago, I stated to various scientists that the moon is not a piece of rock, but it is a plasma phenomenon, cosmic plasma, and that this fact will eventually be confirmed. I made certain predictions which were already confirmed in 1958, and the situation now is coming close to a complete confirmation.
What will be the result if you're proved to be correct in your theories?
The result will be profound and decisive, because it will give proof that a complete reinvestigation of the laws of nature is necessary. Because if the moon is a plasma, no man will ever land on it. The soft landing attempts will all fail. That means that the mass of the moon is far less than is currently assumed. It's in a different state of energy, and it has far less mass. That means there is no more explanation for the tides. If the moon, for example, had only a thousandth part of its current mass, then the tides would only be 2 inches high under conventional theories instead of sometimes 14 feet. And that means that if it is proved that the moon is a plasma, then all gravitational theories are out, and a new concept of the cosmos and of its laws has to be evolved.
Aren't you being a bit adventurous, though, because you know that we're going to be able to test out your theories on the moon fairly soon?
Well, not anymore. 11 years ago, of course, it was rather taking a risk. I was considered a lunatic, of course. But by now, the evidence, accumulated evidence, is already so much in my favor that I'm not taking any risks anymore. On the contrary, there is scientific views expressed all over the world now that the moon seems to be of a quite different nature of what was assumed.
But the Americans and Russians are thinking of landing men on it.
Well, that will never happen. Not on the moon. The moon is definitely, as I assert, a plasma.
Now, Back to non-Professor Dave and his begging the question arguments, all of which arbitrarily presuppose the moon is a giant rock without justification or verification.
Flat earthers have a tiny little moon very close to their disk, flying around, and there is no way in which that can match observation.
Appeal to incredulity fallacy. He can't imagine or understand how the lights could appear that way if Earth's surface is flat. Therefore, he argues there's no way Earth's surface is flat.
If the moon is a sphere on their flat Earth, then everybody should be seeing a different face of it if it's very close.
Begging the question once.
That's right. If they want to make it a little spotlight, a little flat spotlight that's going around so that we would all see the same face, then the shape would change, right? If you take a flat circular disc and move it around, it's going to appear more elliptical depending on your line of observation, line of sight.
Begging the question twice.
If you wanted to make it a sphere and pull it really, really, really far away, like it is in real life, then you can't get it to rise or set.
And begging the question 3 times in a row.
Right, the moon rises and sets. If it's way up here, how, sorry, I can't even see myself on the screen.
No,
if it's way up here, how are you going to get it to rise and set? Right, it appears at the horizon. Right, we can. So there's just it doesn't work.
See what I mean with those last 3 fallacies? For all of them, he's presuming the moon is a material object, but then trying to predict how he imagines it should appear based upon materialism being universally true. He'd either have to prove the metaphysical theory of materialism or empirically verify that the moon is a material object first in order to justify any of those arguments. He can't do either. Of course, he doesn't notice the problem because he's completely logically and philosophically illiterate, being a scientism fundamentalist. Since he dismisses the entire field of philosophy as word salad, of course he'll have no clue that he's begging the question repeatedly. His philosophical illiteracy causes him to conflate his philosophical presuppositions with reality itself over and over.
All we need, there's so many singular disproofs of a flat Earth, but this is one of them. Observations of the moon are incompatible with a flat Earth. End of story.
If materialism is presupposed to be true, that would be right.
Excellent. Yeah, that whole, even the ideas of simple stuff, full moon, half moon, all of these things wouldn't be as we're perceiving them if it was a disk or flat Earth.
Begging the question again.
Correct?
Yeah.
And if it was working in the models that they've presented, of course, there's just no way that it would work.
Most genuine flat earthers don't claim any model, nor do we have any need to. So this is a straw man. You don't need a fully accurate model of all of reality just to verify Earth's surface lacks curvature. It just isn't necessary. Plus, the models they attack are presented almost exclusively by controlled opposition agents whose content is then promoted to the top of search results via the controlled algorithms. So that's all normies see. Without strawmen to attack like this, anti-flat earthers wouldn't have a chance in this debate. So what else can they do but set up and then attack strawmen? They often try arguing, but you need a replacement model of the lights in the sky to disprove ours. But that's only because they don't understand falsification is independent of replacement in science. We certainly can disprove their model by verifying Earth's surface doesn't curve as their model geometrically requires. And we certainly can do that without a new fully accurate model of all of reality. In science, falsification is independent of replacement. Did you need to replace Santa Claus with a new fairy tale prior to acknowledging what you verified? That your parents actually got the presents? Of course not.
I mean, what are the lunar phases? They're reduced to saying that the moon makes its own light, and so you have this thing, and it just it's part of it doesn't emit light. Well, it's not a source of light. It has shadows on it.
It's not a source of light because I beg the question and assume those darkened areas are shadows on a material object. Begging the question again.
These are very obvious. I mean, this.
You look at the craters. You can zoom in.
Sure.
And see shadow. Yeah.
Yet again, begging the question.
you don't even have to. I've looked at the moon at Mount Wilson Observatory, so I saw it with a level of detail in the terrain that is like, it just blew my mind. It's one of my most favorite things I've ever seen in my entire life. But you don't need to Mount Wilson Observatory. You can get a little Celestron, like $200 telescope, and you can look at the moon and you can see some pretty good detail, and it's very clearly not a luminary body like the sun.
Right.
It's very obvious.
Begging the question again. It's not a luminary body because I assume it isn't when I look at it. Never mind the fact anyone can verify for themselves that the moon definitely does give off its own light. The light is verifiably cooler than the light given off by the sun, which only makes sense in flat Earth.
And the mental gymnastics that flat earthers enact to avoid understanding these very, very, very simple explanations.
Dismissing the independently verifiable evidence we provide for this as merely mental gymnastics is an appeal to ridicule fallacy.
That's right. The lunar phases, we're just seeing the half of the moon that is illuminated by the sun. That's it.
Yet again, begging the question.
Right? It's going around us. You can only see something that when light is hitting it, right?
False dichotomy fallacy. There are more options available. You can also see something when it's producing light itself.
Half of the moon that's illuminated by the sun, that's what we see.
Begging the question again.
And so when it's more in front of us, more in between us, not directly in between, that would be an eclipse. That's the other thing, is flat earthers don't know that the lunar orbit is not flush with the ecliptic, right? It's tilted like 10 degrees.
In the heliocentric model, the moon's orbit is tilted about 5 degrees relative to the ecliptic plane, not 10 degrees. This is a common issue where heliocentrists don't even know what they believe. We have to tell them.
So when it's more in between the Earth and the sun, we can't see the side that's being illuminated, because it's the other side that's away from us. That's
Right.
a new moon. And then when it's over on the other side, it's a full moon. We can see it. So, and it takes 27 days to go around. And so that's the lunar phases. So it's you just look at a diagram on the internet. You can just type in lunar phases, Google image search, and you get hundreds of images that all, I mean, I understand that maybe not everybody knew what lunar phases are, and some people are misled, and they go, oh, they think it's like the shadow of the Earth or something like that. And that's a lunar eclipse. So that's a different phenomenon. It's okay to not know these things, but we have the internet, and you can go and you can look and you can find very, very simple, easy to understand explanations for all of these phenomena.
Typical anti-flat earther rationale. Just Google it and blindly believe the top results. That's what scientism fundamentalists think science means. Of course, this is an appeal to consensus fallacy, since you'll only get the current consensus through such cursory searches.
And so to pretend that those are all wrong because you don't understand them or you don't want to understand them.
It's always an ad hominem fallacy to use any variation of "you don't understand X" without any attempt at justification as your rebuttal like that.
It's really infantile. So, yeah.
Ad hominem fallacy. This is also literally anti-science. The entire point of science is to do everything you can to prove yourself wrong, not silence or mock those doing so.
Lunar phases. We didn't get to talk about eclipses, or I was going to talk about eclipses on that debate. We didn't get to it, but it's really not that hard to understand. Children understand these things, you know.
Ad hominem fallacy again. The problem is not that we don't understand, Dave. We were all taught the heliocentric model growing up, just like everyone else was. The problem is that you don't understand that all empirical evidence is theory-laden. This means all empirical sense data of the lights in the sky can be interpreted through a range of worldviews. This is taught in any freshman philosophy of science course. But of course, scientism fundamentalists omit all, or most, limitations of the scientific method from their reasoning process entirely. So, Dave conflates his presupposition of the metaphysical theory of materialism with reality itself over and over. Can he go to the lights in the sky to verify what they are? Or how far away they are? Etc.? Of course he can't. Nor can anyone else reading this. We're expected to blindly believe the moon is a material object merely because governmental space agencies, well known for lying, tell us they went there in the 60s. But that's not independently verifiable to anyone reading this. So it doesn't count as scientific evidence whether you believe them or not. And you may ask, why haven't they gone back to the moon all these decades later?
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Right. That's totally believable. Nothing to see here.
That's why it brings me back, and it is a fact, it seems to me. Dunning-Kruger effect is a real thing.
Ad hominem, of course. And again, we could just as easily reverse this accusation on them. Except we can actually justify it because they clearly do not comprehend the basics of the philosophy of science, as I've covered.
They know more than any astrophysicist, any scientist in the field.
Strawman fallacy. No flat earther argues that. It's not that we're more intelligent or know more. It's that we've opened our eyes to some ongoing problems that not everyone is in a position to easily see. Problems like this.
What is science? People talk glibly about science. What is science? People coming out of a university with a master's degree or a PhD, you take them into the field and they literally don't believe anything unless there's a peer-reviewed paper. It's the only thing they accept. And you say to them, but let's observe, let's think, let's discuss. They don't do it. It's just, is it in a peer-reviewed paper or not? That's their view of science. I think it's pathetic. Gone into universities as bright young people. They come out of them brain dead, not even knowing what science means. They think it means peer-reviewed papers, etc. No, that's academia. And if a paper is peer-reviewed, it means everybody thought the same, therefore they approved it. An unintended consequence is that when new knowledge emerges, new scientific insights, they can never, ever be peer-reviewed. So we're blocking all new advances in science that are big advances. If you look at the breakthroughs in science, almost always they don't come from the center of that profession. They come from the fringe. People see it differently. The finest candle makers in the world couldn't even think of electric lights. They don't come from within. They often come from outside the breaks. We're going to kill ourselves because of stupidity.
Another relevant revelation we've become aware of is that scientists of mainstream academia aren't allowed to even consider theories like this. Any research conflicting with theories dear to the heart of secularists, such as heliocentrism, are automatically rejected for peer review prior to investigation. It's an unspoken rule within the mainstream scientific community that you simply don't do research questioning theories dear to the heart of secularists. It's the quickest path to unemployment, as you're labeled crazy, a woo sympathizer, etc. And given that success within their profession is dependent upon cooperation of peers, any scientist who dares doing such research quickly finds himself excommunicated, as if he committed heresy. Then he's unable to pay his bills or feed his family. As expected, scientists tend to avoid doing such research completely. That's why the group of highly credentialed scientists who did the Convex Earth documentary had to form an independent group outside of mainstream academia just to do the 7 years of experiments verifying Earth's surface doesn't curve. It was fully documented, verified in pretty much every way imaginable, and done with top-of-the-line equipment. Yet mainstream academia completely ignores all of it.
Because these scientists are supposedly paid and under the same conspiracy of they're all hiding and suppressing the reality of what's really going on.
Strawman fallacy again. Yet again, no flat earther argues this. We argue the vast majority of scientists truly believe heliocentrism is true. The problem is they all went through the same education system, which teaches heliocentrism as a given. No other cosmological options are taught as possible options. So they're all deeply indoctrinated to presuppose heliocentrism must be true in all the work they do. This is a problem, given heliocentrism is not a scientifically verified position. The most brilliant scientists have all commented on this. Here's a list of some of the quotes again. On top of not being taught competing options, add the fact scientists have all been taught to believe the government's unverifiable claims that we really did go to the moon, really did send the Mars rover to Mars, really do have satellites orbiting a spherical Earth, etc. The result is the majority of scientists reason as if heliocentrism is an indisputable fact, despite the fact it doesn't even qualify as science. It's a philosophical position they're conflating with a scientifically verified position due to indoctrination. Amazingly, despite such overwhelming indoctrination and peer pressure, some scientists have still had the ability to humble themselves and see through the deception.
Or they don't know, which means you're saying they're ignorant and they're just idiots who don't know what they're looking at.
Right.
Another straw man. Yet again, flat earthers generally don't argue that heliocentrist scientists are ignorant idiots. That's not the issue. They're generally intelligent, respectable people, but they're trained in science, not philosophy. And both sides of this debate are appealing to largely the same body of empirical sense data. They're just interpreting it through different philosophical presuppositions. This means this debate requires advanced literacy in both science and philosophy. But given most scientists lack sufficient training in philosophy, they lack the prerequisite knowledge to have awareness of the scientific fallacies they commit. This has been an ongoing issue between the scientific and philosophy communities for ages. Countless brilliant philosophers have repeatedly told the mainstream scientific community they're not doing their jobs correctly when they extrapolate beyond the domain of science into the domain of philosophy while continuing to presuppose methodological materialism. But they don't listen. Their egos and indoctrination gets in the way, as well as their priority of social acceptance and financial motives. Evolutionist scientists are famous for the same intellectual error in the evolution versus creation debate.
They're all either morons or in on it. But, I'm sorry, how do you have millions and millions and millions of people that are in on it?
Another strawman. Flat earthers don't claim there are anywhere near that many people in on it. Once all the various aspects of this debate are fully understood, there are maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people who are knowingly in on it at the most. You've got to understand that both sides of this debate agree Earth's supposed curvature wouldn't be visible until much higher than commercial airplanes fly. This limits it to only a few hundred astronauts who even claim to have been high enough in altitude to observe Earth's supposed curvature, and they all just happen to be Freemasons. What are the odds? You've also got to understand how compartmentalization works and many other factors.
They're all getting paid full salary to do what? Play Minesweeper all day? Then not do anything, right? If all of the science is a lie, what do scientists do?
Yet another strawman fallacy. We don't argue all the science is a lie.
What do undergrads who are learning science do when they can smell that something's not adding up, right? Where is the line? Where do you join the conspiracy?
Strawman fallacy again. Flat earthers don't claim they join a conspiracy. Like I said, both sides interpret the same empirical sense data through different philosophical presuppositions. So, the vast majority of heliocentrist scientists truly believe heliocentrism is true. They're deceived. And since they lack the prerequisite philosophical literacy to recognize their own intellectual errors, this is an extremely convincing deception.
Is it in second year of grad school? Like, where does it happen? And what about the people who are approaching that line but aren't there? Isn't one of them going to speak out? Isn't one of them going to make a YouTube video that goes, I'm a second year grad student in astrophysics, and these guys in cloaks came up to me today with a briefcase, and they were like, here's $1 million if you don't tell. And this is happening in every single university all over the world, in all of the countries, in all of the sciences. Like, this is the reductio ad absurdum of flat Earth. This is what they have to believe is happening.
All right. Dave likely just crossed the line of overt intellectual dishonesty here. He's been at this for years. There's no way he's unaware that he's strawmanning here. He's been corrected on this countless times by countless flat earthers. And he's not just strawmanning a little bit. He's deliberately painting the most absurd picture he can come up with, and then explicitly claiming this is what they have to believe is happening. No, Dave. It's just that you're a scientism fundamentalist who does not comprehend the limitations of the scientific method. In any philosophy of science course, it's taught that false presuppositions of the scientists themselves can be one of the possible reasons any current consensus can be wrong. Mainstream academia forces their scientists to presuppose materialism even when extrapolating beyond what they can directly verify. So, they're forced to extrapolate with the wrong philosophical worldview. I'm not just guessing that it's the wrong worldview either. Presuppositionalism proves this with 100% certainty. Materialism worldviews entail that science wouldn't even be possible in the first place, since they have no justification for the uniformity of nature, the laws of logic, the reliability of senses, the causal principle, and more.
Either all science is a lie and no one is talking, or all scientists are morons.
False dichotomy fallacy. There are more options available than just those two.
Which doesn't make sense because technology exists. You want to tell me a flat earther can make one of these? No, they cannot.
Wow. Brilliant argument, Dave. Premise 1. Cell phones work. Conclusion. Therefore, we live on a spinning water ball that defies physics with a sky vacuum. Anyhow, his fallacy is another straw man. No flat earther claims all of science is a lie, but the current consensus of mainstream academia is wrong about some theories in which they extrapolate beyond what they can directly verify with the wrong philosophical presuppositions. Evolutionism and heliocentrism are the two biggest examples.
They don't know how anything works. They can do nothing. So
Ad hominem attacks, obviously.
It's also kind of telling with all the dissertations written in every field that has a specialty and the extensive length that they go in presenting their cases, etc. And nobody's writing dissertations on flat Earth anywhere to prove a case against the system. It's just a very odd thing.
As I already covered, the mainstream scientific community has a strict unspoken rule that you don't research topics like this in a public way if you value employment. If you do, you'll be excommunicated for your science sin. They all know not to write papers on such subjects unless they're prepared to be unemployed, or at least suffer extreme lack of cooperation and harassment from their colleagues, at the very least. Just research what has happened to those who have tried it. I won't cover the details here, but it is absolutely ridiculous.
Our second example is ships and the horizon. I always hear them try to say, I could see the ship so many miles out and I could still see the ship. How does the horizon and ships, or the sea, if you will, help prove the Earth is a globe and not flat?
yeah, the horizon in general proves the Earth is a sphere. It proves the curvature. A horizon is an artifact that would not exist if there were not curvature, right?
He's just begging the question again. Simply declaring precisely what is in contention isn't an argument. He's also demonstrably wrong, too. The horizon is simply the optical effect that occurs where the sky appears to meet the ground from any person's particular visual perspective. It would necessarily exist regardless of whether Earth's surface curves or not. The existence of the horizon actually proves flat Earth, when fully and properly understood.
You wouldn't see a sharp limit to how far we can see.
Of course we would. We're not Superman, able to see infinitely far. We can't magically override the limit of perspective, atmospheric attenuation, resolution limits, etc. Begging the question fallacy, since he didn't even attempt to justify this false declaration in which he assumed precisely what is in contention.
Right. And so the more obvious the proof, the more mental gymnastics they have to perform.
Dismissing arguments by labeling them mental gymnastics is an appeal to ridicule fallacy.
And so, you know, something that was noticed hundreds and hundreds of years ago is that ships that went out to sea would disappear bottom up. So the last thing you would see would be the tops of the ship as they recede over the curvature, right? And so they do all these things. They take their Nikon or their Nikon. I got dinged on this, but I say Nikon because I think that's what Japanese people say. And they take their cameras and zoom in, and you know, obviously, they're trying to claim that they're bringing it back over the curve. Well, no, it just didn't. It didn't go beyond the horizon yet, right? There, atmospheric effects or light scattering. Maybe we can't, like, there are optical effects that prevent us from seeing something that's really, really far away. Also, they get very, very tiny. Our eyes are not perfect machines, right? They have limitations, physical limitations.
He just contradicted what he said seconds earlier for why he thinks the horizon proves the globe.
So they pull it back using, or, you know, they make it visible again using some camera. It's like, well, it didn't go over the horizon. Keep watching. Keep watching. What's going to happen? It's going to disappear bottom up. It just didn't go over yet.
Then why did mainstream academia and their science communicators deceive the public for decades by teaching the boat actually was going over a curve prior to high optical zoom cameras being available to the public? Like this.
Curvature of the Earth horizon model of science. Watch. As ships sail away, they don't disappear all at once. No, first, the bottom will disappear. See, the bottom of the ship is gone. Now we can see midway up, and then the whole thing disappears. Now, ships came back. They didn't fall off a table. So people realized that the world is curved. I mean, it's a big curve, but it's curved. So, the process of testing claims, the world is flat, the world is round, is what we call science. Now, if you have a claim that can't be tested, that's what we call pseudoscience. The difference between pseudoscience and regular science is whether or not you can test it. The flat Earth, well, that didn't stand up to tests. The round Earth did. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. The world is round.
Now that the technology available to the public caught up with the lies, they've now got NonProfessor Dave doing damage control. He says it just didn't go over the curve yet. If that's the case, then there's a lot of explaining to do. Why did you all wait to change your story until the previous deception was so thoroughly exposed that it became common knowledge? And why should we believe this latest story with a track record like that? Especially when he's not even attempting to justify it. He's just arbitrarily declaring it will go over the curve if we keep watching, which is assuming precisely what he needs to prove. That's begging the question again.
And so,
I actually heard they did a few, well, multiple people have done this. They had the laser shooting across some, I can't remember how many mile lake. They had to get in a helicopter, fly up in order to hit that laser. You know what I'm talking about? There's
a bunch of these. I mean, they did it on the Flat Earth documentary too, with just the idiot with the flashlight, and I forget which one of those morons it was.
Ad hominem fallacy.
But I mean, yeah, these curvature tests, I mean, yeah, you can do it with a laser too. The laser ones always prove that that the curvature is there if you do it right and if you're not a liar.
Amazing reasoning, Dave. If the test gives the results I want, it's right. If it doesn't, they're liars. Now that's how objective science is done, in the minds of scientism fundamentalists like Dave. Of course, it's an ad hominem fallacy to dismiss the validity of any tests conflicting with your position by arbitrarily calling them liars like that.
Right. The thing is, they have to find something.
Strawman fallacy. We don't have to find something like you do. Remember, not everyone is an intolerant dogmatic zealot about their cosmological position like you, Dave. Every current flat earther used to be a heliocentrist just like you. We were raised with all the same indoctrination as everyone else, and it was very difficult to accept we were deceived. It isn't easy going through major paradigm shifts like this, particularly when it leads to nonstop ridicule and personal attacks from others who emotionally can't handle questioning their deeply held beliefs in an objective manner. Ask any psychologist. It causes severe cognitive dissonance to go through a paradigm shift, even without the mockery and ridicule. No one would voluntarily do this unless the evidence is so overwhelming that it can no longer be hand-wave dismissed any longer. Because some of us value truth so highly that we follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how difficult it can be updating core beliefs. Dave wouldn't know how difficult paradigm shifts are since he's dogmatically stuck to what he was taught to believe growing up, even in the face of indisputable evidence to the contrary. That's the very definition of delusional, by the way.
So they cannot explain anything.
Stereotyping fallacy again. And again, it's false.
Anytime they try to explain a phenomenon, it goes horribly because the Earth is not flat.
Begging the question again.
So they have to make up things. The best, their best defense is we see too far.
Another straw man. Our best defense isn't I see too far. It's all the numerous forms of scientific evidence verifying Earth's surface doesn't curve, which has been confirmed in pretty much every independently verifiable way imaginable at this point, by highly credentialed professionals who formed independent groups ranging to thousands upon thousands of truth-seeking laymen.
That's the main thing that they focus on. I shouldn't see this thing, but I do. And they're always just either misunderstanding math.
It's always an ad hominem fallacy to use any variation of you don't understand X without any attempt at justification as your rebuttal like that.
They're lying.
Ad hominem fallacy again.
Or whatever, right? They all go, Weiss kept trying to point me to Jay Tolan Media, who he says saw something, captured an image of something 1,000 miles away. No, he did not. No, he didn't.
Atheists and scientism fundamentalists are famous for all the symptoms of pseudo-skepticism when debating their deeply held beliefs like this, particularly unsubstantiated counterclaim, or in other words, arbitrarily going no without any attempt at justification.
Why can no one else do that? Why can no one else do it but him?
Loaded question fallacy. Good luck justifying the objectionable premise of the question, which is the universal claim no one else can do that. Non-theistic worldviews can't justify any universal claims about anything. So this is just an arbitrary assumption from Dave.
The idea of all of humanity lying versus this one guy lying.
Strawman fallacy. Flat earthers don't claim all of humanity is lying about this. As I covered earlier, only 1,000 or 2,000 people need to be knowingly in on it at the most.
Right. Is something that is lost to someone who is overtaken by this anti-establishment bias.
Ad hominem fallacy. The personal attack of claimed bias is a great example of psychological projection.
Right.
This reminds me of a scientist in the early 1900s, or maybe it was the late 1800s, 19th century, 20th century, either way, who said that he weighed a dead body after they died and they weighed 21 grams less or something. Well, when it's ever been tested again by everyone else who's ever done it, they said, no, there's no soul that's 21 grams that leaves your body at death. And so kind of makes me think that these observations are being done kind of like miracles in the third world country. Oh, I know somebody raised from the dead down here in this village with no cameras.
Wow. Talk about an apples and oranges fallacy. He's falsely equating two wildly, vastly different scenarios. One guy making a claim about weighing a soul, which no one could independently verify is not even remotely equivalent with the observations done by flat earthers, which have been independently verified by thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who get the same flat results every single time. Literally all independent investigation into Earth's surface verifies it doesn't curve, which is the polar opposite of one guy making an unverifiable claim about a soul. I truly feel bad for anyone who falls for the garbage arguments these guys are spewing. The sad thing is many young, uninformed people are deceived by this kind of sophistry for no reason other than they say it very confidently. Or is it arrogantly?
Well, also, if a soul had mass, it would be made of matter, which would mean we could see it and interact with it. So they're kind of, anyone who brings that up is really digging themselves into a hole by saying that why would a soul have mass? They need it to be a supernatural thing, not a material thing.
Right.
If it's made of mass, it's material and we should do science with it. And we don't see it or detect it in any way. So
by Dave's own rationale, he's really digging himself into a hole then. His own model posits that 95% of the universe's total mass energy constant is composed of something we cannot see or detect in any way. That's why they call it dark energy and dark matter. Dark matter and dark energy are fictional concepts they had to make up, without any evidence, to try to make the math work because the predictions of their model are off by a ridiculous 95% when observing the lights in the sky.
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong.
in that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make any difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make any difference how smart you are who made the guess or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
But anyway, yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, there was another flat earther who said something recently, and I saw a video response where he was like, if I can observe it myself and I do it, I'll believe in round earth. He went out with a flashlight and he told the guy, look, are you standing there? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, lift your arms as high as they can go. And when he did, he's like,
Right.
oh, wow.
This is a fallacy of anecdotal evidence, which is when someone relies on personal testimonies, such as a story based on someone's personal experience, in order to support or refute a claim.
That's the one I'm talking about in the Netflix documentary.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they did two calculations. They're like, if the Earth is flat, you should shine through the hole right here. But if there's curvature, then if I lift it up here, that will compensate for the tiny amount of curvature over this distance, and the light will shine through, and then it'll go through. And then he's, oh, interesting,
Same fallacy again. Nothing about this, even if granted, supports the conclusion they're trying to support, that all flat earthers are biased or dogmatically attached to their position. But worse, they're appealing to Netflix documentaries. Netflix has been repeatedly exposed as controlled and willing to dishonestly edit their documentaries on this subject to blatantly misrepresent. For example, consider that no scientist in history has ever scientifically verified Earth's supposed movement. Yet Netflix dishonestly edited experiments done by flat earthers to create the illusion a flat earther accidentally did. Think about how absurd that is on its face. Flat earthers accidentally did something that would win them a Nobel Prize. Worse, the equipment they use doesn't even have the capability to detect Earth's movement, even if they tried. So this is a slap in the face from Netflix, an insult to the intelligence of the anti-flat earthers they were targeting. Netflix and the following headlines plastered all over mainstream media articles, saying flat earthers proved Earth's rotation, assumed their target audiences are so scientifically illiterate they would actually believe that, and that they won't notice the blatantly dishonest editing by comparing it to the original unedited full-length experiments.
Living off of super chats, and Weiss has this idiotic flat earth app that he charges money for. This is it. This is what they've got. This is their identity.
Wow.
And so when proven wrong, which happens on a daily basis,
Begging the question again.
I by my estimate, I'd say the overwhelming majority, if not all, of the primary flat earthers, the ones that have the larger channels and stuff, are fully aware that they're completely full of shit.
It's funny, because I used to think this about flat earth deniers like Dave, prior to realizing how piss poor their scientific and philosophical literacy truly is. We're dealing with people who think science means blind faith in mainstream academia, people who don't even understand what the limitations of the scientific method are and why they matter, people who don't even know what worldviews are, or that they have presuppositions. People who genuinely believe scientific debates are won by whoever is better at memorizing and regurgitating a body of pre-approved information. People who rack up fallacy after fallacy endlessly, while genuinely believing they gave knockdown arguments. People who don't even conceptually grasp what fallacies actually are, or why they matter. Now, I realize many of these shills don't even realize they're shills.
Weiss, I'm almost certain knows, because he's making a lot of money off of it, or not a lot, but enough to not have some crappy job.
Dave could be right here again. Weiss might know if he's controlled opposition, which he may be.
And all of those other guys, I mean, this is it's been demonstrated to them so clearly, so many times.
It's been demonstrated that scientism fundamentalists like Dave beg the question when looking at the lights and sky so many times, due to scientific illiteracy regarding the fact that all empirical evidence is theory-laden. It can all be interpreted through a wide range of philosophical worldviews to arrive at vastly different explanations of the same phenomena while retaining the same level of scientific validity. So the question is, what is the correct worldview to interpret empirical evidence through? Presuppositionalism proves it's definitely not materialism, which entails science wouldn't even be possible in the first place.
I mean, Weiss himself, it's like in that exchange, there were so many moments where what I said was so undeniably clear.
Yes, it was undeniably clear you were begging the question when appealing to lights in the sky.
And his position was so undeniably indefensible.
All he had to do to defend himself was point out you're begging the question over and over, which invalidates all your arguments in that debate since they all hinged on lights in the sky. You don't even have to take his or my word for it. Here's the list of prominent scientists explaining why you can't scientifically verify the heliocentric model is true that way. Again,
But he was either completely speechless for an extended period of time, or he desperately asked to change the subject and
Yeah, I saw that.
acknowledged that all he wanted to do was change the subject because he had absolutely no way of responding. Now, you tell me, somebody who is searching for truth or somebody who is interested in the facts, why would they behave that way?
to be fair to non-Professor Dave here, it was very odd that Weiss acted that way. Whether he's a controlled opposition agent or just didn't understand that particular point, it matters not. One particular guy not knowing one specific thing off the top of his head, or being a controlled opposition agent, does not mean it logically follows we live on a spinning water ball. So this is another non sequitur fallacy.
Why would they take something that's so crystal clear and dodge it like a bullet?
I ask myself that question every time I've had the misfortune of stumbling across your videos, Dave. You claim to debunk flat Earth by attacking strawman models that no genuine flat earther claims, year after year, no matter how many times you're told you're just attacking strawman. Why are you dodging the real flat Earth like a bullet?
He's a charlatan. There's no two ways about it.
Agreed. A charlatan is a person falsely claiming to have a special knowledge or skill. A fraud. For example, naming yourself Professor Dave when you're not a professor, then repeatedly claiming to debunk flat Earth by attacking strawman models, and endlessly dodging the real thing because you know you can't debunk that. He's a charlatan, no doubt about it.
And I've been getting a lot of, not a lot, but I'd say 80% of the people are on board with the tone that I used in that exchange.
Just wait until he learns what percentage of those commenters who support his tone are bots and paid trolls.
But I get a lot of, oh, Dave is being such a jerk. It's like, look, you don't understand. This is not a discussion happening in good faith. This is not somebody who's looking for facts.
Right.
This is a charlatan who makes money as a grifter by lying to people, and this is the tone he deserves. Every time I prove he's wrong to his face and he tries to change the subject, that's why he deserves mockery. That's why he deserves a sledgehammer of facts across the face.
Beside the ad homs, he's going to have a lot of trouble coping when he realizes he's objectively wrong about this. He didn't prove anything about the shape of the ground beneath his feet by begging the question over and over while looking at the sky above him. Even just referring to those fallacies he committed as a sledgehammer of facts is so unbelievably scientifically illiterate. It'll be tough to cope with if he ever studies the basics of the philosophy of science and learns what the limitations of the scientific method are.
Right. And that's why I did what I did. I held him under my shoe for an hour so everybody could see how pathetic he is.
Listen to the hatred in his voice as he commits these endless ad homs and appeals to ridicule fallacies. Does it sound like someone objectively seeking to understand the truth of what is in contention? Or does it sound like emotional, dogmatic zealotry with a heavy dose of narcissistic projection? The biggest enemy to knowledge is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. And scientism fundamentalists conflate their unjustified philosophical beliefs with scientific knowledge all the time. So, what we're learning is scientism fundamentalism likely is the very worst form of dogmatism humanity will ever face. They can't differentiate truth from fiction properly, since the epistemology of scientism is demonstrably self-refuting. And no matter how severe their dogmatism becomes, they have no chance of self-awareness about it, because they falsely think only anyone who disagrees with them can be dogmatic, which is a dogmatic fallacy itself.
And I guarantee you it made an impact on them. So
Oh, yeah, that was an intense discussion.
Yep.
One of the things you said up front that I thought was relevant for those who feel some type of way about your attitude or your rhetoric. You pointed out his conclusion, and the way he's drawn this is exactly what I was saying earlier. They're either saying, in effect, everybody's a liar or everybody's an idiot.
Which is profoundly insulting.
There, he said it. Think about what this reveals about their psychology deep down. They truly believe that if they're wrong, then they're idiots. Of course, it doesn't mean that. People can be wrong about things. It happens all the time. It's fine. But what's particularly revealing is Dave specified the idea of being wrong about this is profoundly insulting to him. This not only reveals his emotional bias that he was projecting earlier, but it tells you he's personalized his deeply held beliefs to the point where he conflates critiques of his position with an attack against him on a personal level. Typical narcissistic mindset, right there. And the way they keep projecting their own negative attributes, which they've buried deeply psychologically onto their ideological opponents, is behavior common among narcissists too. It's a self-defense mechanism in which the ego defends itself against disowned and highly negative parts of the self by denying their existence in themselves and attributing them to their ideological opponents instead. Notice how Dave focuses on personal attacks and appeal to ridicule fallacies almost exclusively. Now you know why, but of course he can't handle criticism for that either. So he imagines up a way to blame shift onto his ideological opponents for that too. And the cycle continues infinitely. That's why the fallacy count is so high in all his videos. His goal isn't seeking to understand truth. It's seeking validation. His pre-existing beliefs are the truth.
Just by the stance alone. Whereas it seems like in your position, you grant some actually believe this stuff.
It's not just some of us. Statistics show there are well over 100 million flat earthers worldwide at the least, less than a decade after this movement began picking up. That places it high in the running for the most successful movement in human history, by the numbers. Don't fall for their repeated attempts to misrepresent this as if it's some rare position almost no one holds. A lie mainstream media echoes.
And some just aren't aware, and others are aware, and they're just full of it.
Some believe it, otherwise you couldn't make money off of it. Right. They make the people who are given money on the super chats, and stuff like that. They're like, oh, go guys, you're exposing the truth. I mean, somebody has to be falling for it. There has to be a mark. For any con, there's a mark. If there's no mark, there's no con. And if there's no con, there's no money.
Wow. NonProfessor Dave, of all people, misrepresenting the flat earth community as if our priority is money. Now, that's rich. Just compare the ratios of who monetizes their channel, who's sponsored, who benefits from the controlled algorithms, who's censored and shadow banned, who's sticking to the safe status quo position, etc. Anyone in their right mind who prioritizes worldly motives like social acceptance and financial success wouldn't touch flat earth with a 10-foot pole, unless it's to be a controlled opposition agent. The most worldly of all would be like Dave and just outright be a shameless establishment shill. As you listen to him blatantly project some more, try looking up his net worth. He's listed as an actor worth over $700,000.
And these guys, they just pick something that's so ridiculous.
Appeal to ridicule fallacy. It only seems ridiculous to you, Dave, because you conflate your unjustified philosophical presuppositions with reality itself. And because you've been so deeply indoctrinated ever since you were tiny. They specifically teach the globe to children as one of the first things in school, before we can think critically for ourselves.
That, like, how many people are you going to trick? I mean, there's maximum a few thousand flat earthers in the entire world.
This is an outright outrageous lie. Type in the words to 10 million Brazilians. Earth is flat. It's a mainstream media source. So Dave is lying even according to the mainstream narrative itself. For the most prominent anti-flat earther, there's no possible excuse for this. He's fully aware he's lying. He just doesn't care, as he's driven by emotion and ego, not truth. He knows his target audience isn't the type to actually check his claims. He knows this is all about tickling their ears by telling them what they want to hear.
But this is their thing, right? If you believe the earth is flat, it's your entire identity. It's not a casual belief.
Stereotyping fallacy. Again, he's just making sweeping generalizations about an entire demographic. I know plenty of flat earthers who rarely even focus on the issue. Dave is projecting again here, who was conflating critiques of his position with attacks against him as a person earlier, who declared it's profoundly insulting for anyone to dare question his belief regarding which cosmological theory is true just moments ago.
Right.
Right.
You're all in, and you're all about this red pill, blah, blah, blah. And this is what you talk about all the time. And these are the people that you correspond with. And this is like your big thing. This is your way of, it's a way for when you have someone who is a delusional narcissist, but also incredibly stupid.
Notice we're over an hour into this now. Other than a constant stream of personal attacks and appeals to ridicule that he's filled almost all the time with, what has he given in terms of actual arguments? Well, he tried to prove the shape of the ground beneath his feet by appealing to lights in the sky above him. And of course, he unwittingly applied the metaphysical presupposition of materialism to those lights in the sky, while conflating those non-scientific claims with scientific claims to commit category error fallacies. Is he truly this arrogant just because of those fallacies he committed while looking at lights in the sky? Or could those net worth websites be trying to tell us something by listing him as an actor? He simply assumes his model to try to prove his model, then foolishly declares victory, followed by repeated projection of his own intellectual insecurities. The hilarious part is, he thinks it's us, not him, demonstrating Dunning-Kruger effect.
They have to deny all of reality in order to prop themselves above everyone else, right? They can't be wrong and dumb because they're delusional narcissists. So everything in the entire world is wrong.
Other than the usual personal attacks, he accused flat earthers of claiming everything in the entire world is wrong, which is an obvious straw man fallacy. We're only claiming heliocentrism. His particular cosmological model is wrong. Not everything in the entire world. But think about what this straw man reveals about his mindset. He implicitly admitted he considers this particular issue to be, in his own words, everything in the entire world. Now, think about what he just got done accusing flat earthers of, merely seconds ago. He falsely stereotyped all flat earthers as thinking that exact way about their position. He said if you believe the earth is flat, it's your entire identity. You're all in. Could the narcissistic projection be any more obvious? How many times am I going to catch Dave clearly projecting like this? Red-handed.